The Mappila Uprising of 1921 anti-Hindu. The one phenomenon that is most ubiquitous on the internet and on TV channels is xenophobia. Almost all groups practice this in one form or the other. But Islam and Muslims, for reasons unfathomable by a novice, are the targets of much vilification. This video seeks to examine the veracity or otherwise of the oft-repeated allegations that the Mappila Muslims of Kerala, India, massacred Hindus and forcibly converted many to Islam during the Mappila Uprising of 1921. Before we delve deeper into the specific subject, it will be in order to look into the background of the Mappilas, the history of Hindu-Muslim relations in the region, the causes of the Mappila Uprising, or as erroneously called the Mappila Rebellion, what activities characterized the uprising, what phases did it pass through. British colonial policy of divide and rule will also be examined in the light of historical records and some recent research. Let's take a quick look at who were the Mappilas. The Muslim community in the southwestern coast of Kerala are called Mappilas, or in their anglicized form as Mappilas. Mappilas are descended from Arab traders through marriages they contracted with local women in the western coast and from converts to Islam, mainly from the Hindu lower castes. Arab traders in the 7th century dominated the trade in the Indian Ocean. Malabar became their chief center of trading activities. Shah Jahan Madampat, a prominent journalist from Malabar, has succinctly summarized the history of Hindu-Muslim relations in the Malabar from the time the Arab traders made Malabar their home until the arrival of the British in the region. He writes, open quotes, Hindu-Muslim relations in Malabar did undergo many ups and downs over long centuries. The nature of relations and the intensity of closeness or degree of distance fluctuated throughout history until India gained independence and the state of Kerala was formed on the basis of Malayalam as the common language. The pre-colonial period hardly saw a significant rupture in intercommunal relations, though historians mention some sporadic localized incidents. This was primarily due to two facts. As Theodore Gabriel points out in his book Hindu-Muslim Relations in North Malabar, 1498 to 1947. First, Islam came to the Kerala coast via peaceful traders from Arabia. It was in their vital interests to forge harmonious and symbiotic relations with their hosts. Second, the Muslims in Kerala never made any attempt at political conquest in spite of the military and financial muscle at their disposal. They functioned largely as an orderly component of the society, contributing substantially to the collective security and economic welfare and to the cultural pool. They also played a leading political role in the dominions of the region's Hindu kings, particularly under the Zamorin of Calicut, dealing with the kings from a standpoint of self-confidence and latent power rather than subservience. But this state of amity was not to last very long, as powerful foreign elements soon entered the scene and bitter political rivalries ensued. The solid economic base of the Muslims in the region faced an existential challenge from the Portuguese. The accommodation and tolerance extended to the Muslims by the Hindu kings was primarily because of the prosperity that they had brought to the land. When the Hindu kings saw in the Portuguese a powerful contender for that role and felt they could bring better benefits in terms of revenue and military wherewithal, all of them except the Zamorin shifted their patronage to the new arrivals, infuriating the Muslims. This marked the beginning of a long period that saw a wane in the trust between the two communities. Hostilities thus generated during the Portuguese era were sharpened during the rule of Malabar by Hyder Ali and his elder son Tipu. The Muslims welcomed the Mysoreans, for it meant for them an end to the deprivations and loss of status brought about by the Portuguese.
Quotes closed.
The brutality that the Mysorean rulers wreaked upon the local Hindu population in the Malabar was primarily due to the fact that the local Hindus were found to be supportive of the British. This exacerbated the mutual distrust and hostility. The genesis of the Mappila Uprising, the influence of the Khilafat movement, and matters of this type are all discussed in the first episode of this documentary. In this episode, we will focus mainly on discussing whether the Mappila uprising was primarily anti-Hindu. The discussion that follows is about the factors that led to the Mappilas taking the law into their own hands and why they went against those who supported the British police and the army.
Police atrocities against Mappilas and its effects.
One of the primary sources for information on the police tortures during the Mappila uprising
is Modikunnat Brahmadatta Nambudripad.
Modikunnat was a high caste Hindu, an active Congress worker, and was himself arrested by the British forces and subject to severe torture while in custody. His book on the Khilafat movement in Malabar is unique in that he describes and details some events that he personally experienced. In his book, he informs readers that the root cause of the Khilafat agitation was the British government's assault on the Arabian Muslim holy places under the Turkish Sultan. For the troubles that erupted in August 1921 and cascaded into a major conflagration involving great loss of life and property, he squarely blames the police atrocities. At one place, he writes that the police atrocities against the political prisoners may be compared to that of Nazis during Hitler's totalitarian regime. Numerous instances of police excesses have also been reported by newspapers published during this period. The Malayali newspaper of 14th May 1921 describes the atrocities of the police as surpassing those committed by the Germans in Belgium. The police tried to frustrate a Khilafat conference on the 24th of July 1921 at Pudu Ponnani. They tried to prevent Ali Musliar, the most prominent leader of the Mappilas, from attending the conference. Ali Musliar and his followers broke the police cordon and joined the conference, which turned out to be a great success. This frustrated the police, leading to an increase in their atrocities. However, these police excesses did not succeed in containing the Khilafat movement in the Malabar. The following extracts are taken from the book Peasant Protests and Revolts in Malabar, pages 460 to 477. The Qawmi report of 20th February 1921 writes, "The reason which Mr. Thomas has assigned for arresting and imprisoning our national leaders is that Mappilas are possessed with the jinn of fanaticism, and it is feared that they will cause a riot. But we consider that the latter have convinced Mr. Thomas that they are endowed with religious fanaticism, but not with political mania. Mr. Thomas, with his political mania, collected arms, ammunition and police, whereas the Mappilas, with their religious fanaticism, practiced patience, thankfulness, trust in God, forbearance and prayer. It seems that the Mappilas' supposed religious fanaticism is better, purer and grander than Mr. Thomas's actual political mania." The Yogakshimam of 12th May 1921 points out that the police high-handedness at Ottapalam was twice as serious as the Punjab atrocity. The Mohammedan, another newspaper, for the week ending 25th August writes, "Not a brick of government property did they touch before the incident. Not a telegraph line concerned them, nor a foot of rail, till the collector perpetrated what to every Muslim would appear an outrageous act of calculated sacrilege." Referring to the recent disturbances in Malabar, the Deshabhaktam of 23rd August 1921 remarks, "It will be no mistake to state that such incidents would not have occurred had any calm man other than Mr. Thomas been the head of the administration in Malabar." The Swarat of the 13th October 1921 observes, the military, with the help of the police, instead of arresting the culprits, they hunted out many entirely innocent Mappilas and blindly ill-treated them. They insulted most cruelly well-born and respectable Mohammedan women. The Muslim of the 19th December 1921 says, the soldiers, for mere amusement, shoot down Mappilas. They walked off with all the money and jewelry found in Mappila houses. Police officers extort huge amounts of money by intimidation. Several police officers have thus become rich. Unlike the Congress-led non-cooperation members, Ali Musliar's men resisted police oppression with force. The obvious result was increased police atrocities against the Mappilas led by the Khilafat leaders. A further allegation leveled against the police was they were insidiously trying to drag Musliar and company into a rebellion by some foul trick or other. At another place, Panikkar writes, in the course of the day there were two confrontations. The first took place when a crowd of about 2,000 under the leadership of Kuni Khadar was advancing from Tanur to Tirrangadi. A police posse was deputed to prevent their joining the Tirrangadi Mappilas. The Tanur Mappilas were not armed except for the sticks they carried, as evident from the government communique which admitted that the police charged with fixed bayonets and were met with sticks in self-defense. Outnumbered by the mob, but determined to stop its advance, the police opened fire, reportedly without any call to disperse or warning. Quotes closed. The news of this firing incensed the crowd which had gathered at Tirrangadi. They had remained calm all along, but the news of the firing proved to be the proverbial last straw. Panikkar, quoting K. Madhavan Nayar's book Malabar Kalappam, pages 111 to 112, asserts that until then the efforts of the Khilafat leaders to pacify and control them had succeeded. Ali Musliar made a last-minute effort to restrain them by suggesting that only 3 emissaries need go, but the entire crowd followed the emissaries. Quoting the same source, Panikkar says, the firing that ensued, according to eyewitness accounts, totally disproves the government version that it was in self-defense. T.V. Muhammad, who had accompanied the crowd, described the events thus. The crowd was stopped by the military guarding the eastern road and questioned what they wanted, to which the crowd answered they wanted only the release of their friends. Then they were asked to sit down and told that their friends will be soon released. The people obeyed and seated themselves on the road. However, a volley of shots were sent at the seated crowd with absolutely no warning of any kind. The infuriated mob rushed pell-mell into the military lines and killed 2 Europeans and 2 or 3 reserve men with their hands and knives. Panikkar states that although a fairly large crowd drawn from different areas had assembled at Tirrangadi to avenge the insult thrown upon the Islamic sentiments, they did not take any retaliatory steps either on their way to or on their arrival in Tirrangadi. And once they knew that the mosque had not been fired at and destroyed, the assembled Mappilas were prepared to lend ear to the advice of the Khilafat leaders. At any rate, they had not come prepared to fight. The Tanur Mappilas had nothing but, quote, formidable sticks with them. Those who had come to the weekly fairs at Tirrangadi and Kottakkal could not have carried arms. The humiliation suffered at Tirrangadi on 20th August gave rise to a feeling of vendetta among the British authorities, who let loose a reign of terror thereafter. Any Mappila who fell into the hands of the police or the army was subject to the worst kind of third-degree torture. This hardened the resolve of the Mappila leadership not to surrender. News of the daily brutalities wreaked by the police on the local population and on Mappila inhabitants drove the rebels to take a stand against all those who abetted the police and the army. The root cause of the rebellion is not to be sought in communal conflicts. It sprang out of political repression. Police atrocities provoked it, reiterates Namboodiripad. It is for these reasons that the Mappila fighters went against all those who collaborated with the police, even if they were from their own fraternity. Many Malabar historians consider the massacres carried out by the police and the British Army to be far more horrendous than the Jallianwala Bagh incident in 1919. Mozi Kunnat asks why the Congress did not protest these killings like they did the killings in Amritsar on the 13th of April 1919. Panikkar too mentions about this rather insipid and lukewarm response of the local Congress leaders when they got wind of the imminent army crackdown against their Mappila brethren. He singles out K.P. Keshava Menon, Secretary of the Provincial Congress Committee, for abdicating his responsibility.
The excerpts from newspapers contemporaneous to the uprising lead one to conclude that it was, in the main, police atrocities that outraged the Mappilas, and the outrage was targeted at symbols of government and those who colluded with the authorities. Yet Hindu members of the Central Legislative Assembly, like Rao Bahadur T. Rangacharyar, made contemptuous remarks during a debate on 8 September 1921 about the quote-unquote fanaticism of the Mappilas and blamed their illiteracy and impoverished conditions for the revolt against the government. His derogatory remarks during the proceedings of the legislature, Evers Panikkar, would not have remained unexpunged in any civilized society's parliament or legislature. He had the gall to state, "The Mappilas have earned an unfortunately bad name for nearly over a century, and I do not know if they ever had a good name. The term Mappila, as perhaps you may permit me to explain, merely means the mother's child. Ma is mother and Pilla is child. That is to say, their mothers are known, their father's side is unknown." Quotes closed. However, interestingly, the then Home Minister, the Honourable Sir William Vincent, in his response, placed on record the following: "Possibly as a Hindu, one of a class that suffered at their hands, he has some prejudice against them. But in many respects, I understand, apart from occasional outbreaks of violence, they have many merits. They also have a more positive and direct belief in the pleasures of a future world than many of us have. When they do rise, the Mappilas have one wonderful virtue which will appeal, I am sure, to everyone: the fiercest courage. These men are, I understand, absolutely fearless and invite death in the hope of gaining a martyr's crown." Some Muslim members of the Central Legislative Assembly took issue with certain negative comments made by Sir William Vincent in his lengthy response. Reproduced below are excerpts of the speeches of Mr. K. Ahmed, followed by the one by Mr. Muhammad Yamin Khan, and the powerful arguments put forth by Mahmud Shamnad during the debate. Mr. K. Ahmed: "Sir, it is very deplorable to read in the newspapers that from 500 to 600 human lives were taken away in the twinkling of an eye. Now, if, as is pointed out, the Mappilas are savage people, then it is a matter for shame that the British rule for 150 years has not civilized them sufficiently." Mr. Muhammad Yamin Khan: "On the one hand, we are told that there have been Hindus killed as such, not because on account of their money, but because they have been Hindus. They have been forcibly converted to Islam, and on the other hand, Khilafat is blamed. The Khilafat has got no grievance against the Hindus. Whatever grievance the Khilafat has got is against the British cabinet and not against the Indian people. There is a suspicion in the minds of some people that the government account is a pill for the people to swallow, so that people may be misled by the story that Hindus were forcibly converted to Islam and thus Hindu sentiments very naturally be aroused against the followers of Islam. Mahmud Shamnar Sahib Bahadur. Mahmud Shamnar Sahib Bahadur, who was from the Madras province, responding to Rao Bahadur C.S. Subramaniam and other members of the Central Legislative Assembly on 8 February 1922, had this to say: the rioting or rebellion was started as a joint concern by some Mappilas, Nayars and others of the non-cooperation party, and in the beginning all were arrested and punished indiscriminately. Laterally, however, a change came on. These Nayars and others were somehow or the other made to feel that the safer course for them would be to desert the Mappilas and show themselves to the British as their foes. Therefore, as soon as the martial law was proclaimed and military came to the place, these people, instead of advising the Mappilas that it was madness to oppose the government, just as they advised them in the beginning to regard the British people as the enemies of their religion, went along with the police and military and joined them in Mappila houses and outraging their women. When these Mappilas saw their co-workers turning against them, they considered it a treachery. Therefore, when the military retired in the evenings, these took their revenge upon them by killing them or confiscating their properties. Many have also escaped their punishment by offering to become converts. This is the story of conversion, looting, and murder by the Mappilas. If they were activated by the desire of proselytizing for the sake of religion, then why did they allow many others to remain amidst them without molesting them in the least? Why did they loot and murder Mappilas as well? Those that did not trouble them, they also did not trouble. All Pattar Brahmins were living in their midst quite peacefully.